Alright folks, today we are going to show you how to take the crank apart on your Flatlander. Alright, tools you're going to need. You're going to need a 1/2-inch socket wrench. You're going to need an 8mm hex. You're going to need a bottom bracket pulling tool, and then you're going to need the crank arm pulling tool. Alright, first we're going to pull off our crank bolts real quick. And this is where you're going to use that 8. Just going to undo it real fast. And we're going to do the other side real quick. Make sure I'm still in frame. Yep. They can be in there too, so you know, it might take you a little bit to break it. You might have to turn it one way or the other just to kind of get it loosened up, but once we get these guys off, we're going to use our crank arm puller. So you can get all these tools out of our shop maintenance kit. Pretty easy. You just kind of screw this guy in here, the top of the crank arm. Alright, so in order to pull these crank arms off, you're going to need a 14mm socket. So let's put this on here and let's pull these arms. And as we go through, it's going to pull these arms right off as we tighten down the tool. Alright, it's that easy. So on the drive side, you want to take off your chain real quick. It's pretty easy. Then you'll just grab your crank arm pulling tool and you'll just screw her in real quick. Alright. Now keep in mind, they can be a lot harder to take off. You might have to put quite a bit of pressure on them to get them to break off. I've actually been working on this bike, so it's a little bit easier for me to take them off already. I've already had them off once. So now that we have the crank arms off, you can take off the little disc here. This is the disc that tells the sensor down here that we are in motion, that we are pedaling the bike. So let's take that off. Now we can grab our bottom bracket tool, and actually we're gonna start on the non-drive side. So we're gonna go over here to the opposite side. Now this is when you would use your 1/2-inch socket wrench to pull this off, but just for sake of ease, I'm here in the shop. You can use an impact gun, air gun. I'm just going to use my air gun real quick. It's pretty simple for me. So on the non-drive side, you got to remember that it's lefty loosey, righty tighty. So it's going to be, we're just going to go left. It would help if your compressor has air in it. Here we go. Now I have air in the compressor. Let's try this again. Alright, we just loosened the non-drive side, and now we need to undo the drive side. Keep in mind that on the drive side we have reverse threads. So if you have an impact gun, or if if you have a socket, that 1/2 inch socket, now's the time to reverse. All right, here we are on the drive side. Right there you go. There's the bottom bracket right there, and it'll show you. Let me make sure. Yep, it'll show you left and right. So it makes it pretty easy when you're putting it back in. It's just your stance. So you'll put it in like so. So when I take the bottom bracket out, it will allow my power sensor just to hang free there, and yeah, it's pretty easy just to undo, and then you can just pull this right out. So that's actually pretty easy to switch out if you need to. You can see that that wire will extend up into the battery cavity, and then yeah, there's a little connector inside here. It's pretty easy fix once you know how to take that crank apart. So one thing I recommend doing before you put the bottom bracket in is just greasing it up, and I just like to grease the threads really well. This will make it easier getting it off and on. And you know, sometimes if these are over tightened, they can make a really loud kind of a ticking, or you know, you can impact the bearings too if it's too tight. So I just like to just do a quick coat of grease before I throw it back in. Okay, now that we have this bottom bracket nice and lubed, what we're going to do is we're going to take our sensor. Let's say, well, if you needed to replace your sensor, you can take your new sensor here and just feed the bottom bracket through. And remember, we're reverse threads on this. So if we go lefty, it's going to tighten up here. I like to just hand feed it there. Then I can grab my tool. Okay, you gotta remember you want to have the sensor pointing at the bottom here. Make sure you guys can see that. Okay. Now we can flip the bike around. We can do our other side. Now, remember to lube this side up too. I'm going to do that real fast. All right, get her nice and lubed. And just remember, on the non-drive side, it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Get it. Start it with our hand, and we can grab our tool. All right, just for the sake of it being easy here in the shop, I'm going to use my air gun, but I'm not gonna finalize my tightening with this. I'm just going to get it close. And then I'll just finish it, I'll finish tightening it with my 1/2 inch socket wrench. Okay, now that we have finished tightening our bottom bracket with our 1/2 inch socket wrench, we're gonna throw the disc back on here. So here we go. And make sure that the A is pointing towards you when you're putting it on there. This is very important. This lets the bike know that you are in motion. So let's not forget that. And then you can put your crank arm back on. And you just make sure it kind of lines up. It's going to be a square. And now you're going to need that 8mm to tighten back up. All right, guys, just make sure you don't over tighten your crank bolts. but you'll want them nice and snug. I do suggest thread lock, Loctite, when you're putting these on. You got to remember, these bikes have a tremendous amount of torque, and we'll take any help we can get keeping our hardware from loosening up on us. So just make sure you crank these down really good, tight, with a little bit of thread lock. All right, non-drive side. We just got to make sure that if our, that first crank arm we put on, it'll naturally sag to the bottom. We'll want to put the non-drive side crank arm straight up. And all we need to do from here is just tighten it up. Now you'll want to throw some thread lock on there. And then make sure you put thread lock on it. You want them nice and tight. Alright guys, that completes our video for the crank. Remember, if you guys have any questions, feel free to give us a call. We're pretty good at walking you through little fixes like this. So